Hello, welcome to my live UI design stream. I'm going to do something fairly straightforward today, keep it quite short. Just going to have a look at setting up a button component set in Figma, component variants, essentially creating different states, different sizes, different sort of setups of button components that all live within a component set. So if you're not familiar with component sets, then hopefully this might be helpful. If you are, then probably less helpful, but you know, if anyone ever sees this, then maybe it would be of some interest. So yeah, let's get started. So I've got new Figma file here. So like I say, I'm going to try and keep this pretty short, pretty simple, nothing too fancy. We're just going to try and set up a basic set of button components. We're going to cover things like initial state, hover state, clicked state, I guess disabled. Can obviously go as far as looking into things like different sizes, you know, buttons with an icon, buttons without an icon, that kind of thing. But I'm just going to keep it pretty straightforward, just to kind of walk through the basics of how to set up a component set and how that can be useful for something like buttons in particular. That can be really handy way of building them in Figma. So first thing I'm going to do is going to set up a new frame, and we're going to just put some text in there. I'm going to say button. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so then what we're going to do is we're going to set auto layout for this button. That just means that we always get the same, we control the padding essentially and the layout of the content within this frame over here on our control panel. So we're going to say we want us to sit in the middle, and we want, let's say, 10 at the top and the bottom, and 20 maybe at the sides, maybe 30. Okay, so that's our button. And the nice thing here, again, if you're not particularly familiar with it, the nice thing about auto layout is that if I change this text like this, you'll see that the frame automatically resizes to fit that, so that our padding that we set is always right. What we got here, auto layout has a new look. Let's ignore that for now. Look at that, live proof that what I'm telling you is already outdated. But anyway, I'll crack on. So let's round these corners over, because you know, I like a nice rounded button. I'm going to give this a background colour. Make that white. There we go. So this is going to be our initial state for the button. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to name this layer, this frame, using forward slashes, and that just means that when I do convert it to a component set, it will pull through how I name this as the properties for the component set. So I'm going to call this large initial, and no icon. Do that for now. I think we'll probably adjust it as we go, but for now we'll start with that. I'm aware that this isn't actually a component yet, but I'm going to get it all set up first, and then once everything is ready, turn each of these individual frames into a component, and then turn the entire group of them into a component set. That's just how I tend to do it. You know, you might want to do it a slightly different way, but yeah, that's how I like to get set up my component sets. So now we're going to say for hover, we're going to pick a slightly slightly lighter blue. So we just go in here, rename initial to hover. We're going to do this again, and we're going to grab this colour, so back to the colour we had originally, and we're going to go a bit darker, and this is going to be our clicked or active state. Oh, and then finally we're going to say disabled, and we're going to take this, I'm going to make this just a very light grey. Like that. I don't know about anyone else, but the word button no longer looks like a word to me, so yeah, I hate when that happens. So right, here we go. So we've got 4 states already. So we've got initial, hover, active, and disabled. Let's rename that. So straight away we could just link these all up as set them as components, set those group those components as a component set, and we'd be good to go. But we're actually gonna duplicate these, and we're gonna make a small version. So let's take our text size, and we're going to say 14. Now you see that as soon as I did that, let me undo that and redo it again. So that's how they are. And as soon as I make that text size smaller, the buttons themselves get smaller because we've set that padding in the auto layout, and it's keeping that same padding. But what I'm actually going to do is just adjust that a little bit. So we're going to say 8 for the top and the bottom, and maybe 20. Yeah, so that looks, I mean, I could have obviously scaled that more accurately, but that looks fine for the purposes of what we're doing here. So we've got our large buttons and our small buttons, so we need to select all of these and do a bit of a name change. So we're going to say where it currently says large, we're going to change that to small. I'm not going to bother doing more than 2 sizes because I think it gets the point across just for these. So now I'm going to go through, I've got these named how I want my component set properties to be set, and going to turn all of these individually into components. So they're now transitioned from frames to components. I can select all of them, all 8, and then we see over here combine as variants. So this is what turns our 8 individual components into a component set, or a component variants set. So we're going to hit that, and then you'll see this sort of dashed purple line appears around them, and that's showing us that they're set up as a component set. Within that, they're all still individual component layers, but they sort of exist within this single button component set. Now again, you'll see, let me just undo that again, show you again. So you'll see that the first part of these names I've given them, for all of them is the same, it's all button. So as soon as I hit combine as variants, it automatically Figma knows, okay, I want to call this set button, so it pulls that out, and then we can see over here in the variants details that it's also identified that we've got 3 properties. So we've got property 1, large or small, so we're going to rename that size. There are other ways to do this. You can before you set the component set up, you can name your individual components in a slightly different way so that it pulls through these property names. I don't tend to do that. I don't think it's better or worse either way really. This is just how I like to do it. So we're going to say the second property is state. So then it's pulled through again. It's recognised from our naming convention that we've got 4 states here: active, disabled, hover, and initial. And then property 3, because we've said all of these are no icon, let's pull them all through saying they're all no icon. There's some nice stuff you can do here where if you've got a variant property which is just a sort of true or false or yes or no, it will actually, over here, rather than being a drop down, it will actually show you a toggle switch, which is quite nice. Obviously I've not currently got any of these buttons with icons, so it's not showing us that as yet. But if I expand on this further, then that would be something that we could incorporate there. So this is essentially our component set all sorted, and then what we're going to do, there's kind of two things that I think make component sets really useful in sort of two contexts. One is within a design, within a UI design, if you've got different screens, different frames that are showing different states of a button or different states of any content that you want to use as a component set, you can just quickly and easily flick between the property settings of that component set in your design, and you don't have to do a different version for hover and disabled and whatever. It's all just exists in that one component set, which we can see here in my local components. It's just this button. The other way that they're super handy is when you're prototyping with Figma. You can have these be interactive in the prototype, where previously you would have to duplicate lots of frames, and in other software you'd have to duplicate lots of frames showing the defaults, the initial state, the hover state, the disabled state, that kind of thing, and each of those would have to be its own frame with all the content that you're showing there in that view, and then you prototype link between them. Whereas with this, you just have your one design, your one frame, and within that you can have these single component sets, variants, and then you can prototype these themselves. So we're going to do that now quickly. So I'm going to go to prototype up here, and I'm going to say this is our initial state. So link that to our hover state, and we're going to say while hovering, go to this. If you're then hovering and you click, you go to this, and then we're going to say we'll set that, and then we're going to say mouse leave, jump back to the default, and then we're going to do the same here for these ones. So while hovering, on click, and then mouse leave. We don't need to prototype up disabled options because disabled variants, because they're disabled, so you don't have any interaction with them. So what I'm going to do now, I'll sort of show you both of the contexts I just talked about in one go here. So just adding a new frame, I'm going to say this is my local components, I've got this button, and this is my component set. So you'll see when I drag it in, we just see the large variant and the initial state, and then over here we get these controls. So we can say, oh, I don't want the large, I want the small, or I don't want the initial, I want this to be disabled, disabled large. So there you can see how, if this is part of a design, a static design, then you can quickly and easily set this how you need it to, without having to create different versions, different iterations of it every time. Let's put this back to large and initial, so in the middle. Yeah. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set this as a prototype flow starting point. Again, I realise that some of this might be new if you're watching this, so I know I'm sort of glossing over some of these aspects that they themselves might be new to you, so apologies if so, but we've set this new frame up as a starting point for the prototype. So I'm going to hit preview up here. It's going to think about it for a surprisingly long amount of time for such a simple design. Right, here we go. So here's our button, and then we should see when we hover over it, let's zoom in a little bit, when we hover over it, we get the lighter version. If I then click, it goes dark. It's not quite right actually, because it should be while pressing, I think, but we can sort that out. But yeah, so you can see there, you know, just with that one component in the frame, we're actually able to create what looks like a, you know, relatively accurate interactive prototype. So let's tweak this a little bit, because that wasn't quite right there. So we're going to say while pressing. Let's see if that is a bit better. And run that again. Zoom in again. Right, so hover. There we go, that's what we want. So whilst you press, it goes dark, and then as soon as I let go, it goes back to the hover, and then I can mouse off and go back to the initial. What you can't do here is change, say, to the disabled state. That would have to be done here on my frame. Like that, and then we go back to our prototype. It's disabled, and as you can see, now it's the disabled variant. There's no interactions on it at all, so it pulls through. From what I've set up here in my prototyping. So, you know, this, as I say, this is super basic, but that is essentially how to set up a nice and simple but powerful button component set in Figma. So I might build on this, take it a bit further in another video, maybe add in the icon, no icon toggle, and a few other aspects to it. But yeah, hopefully that's been helpful if you're watching this and you wanted to learn a bit more about component sets in Figma, and a few other sort of brief mentions of some other bits and pieces from Figma as well. I hope that's helpful, and yeah, hopefully see you again soon at some point. Thanks very much. Cheers.